October 20th, 2011, Libya's most feared dictator, Muammar Gaddafi, was dragged from a concrete culvert by revolutionaries, bloodied, battered, and begging for his life. The man who ruled with an iron fist for 42 years would meet a brutal end, caught on camera and broadcast to the world. But what really happened that day? And how badly did Gaddafi beg for his life? Here are the 7 weirdest final words of dictators before execution.
Dragi tovarăși și prieteni, cetățeni ai capitalei României socialiste.
December 21st, 1989. Nicolae Ceausescu stands on his balcony, expecting another staged show of loyalty. He begins his speech, but soon, the carefully orchestrated crowd turns on him, derailing decades of totalitarian control in real time. For nearly a quarter century, Nicolae Ceausescu ruled Romania with an iron fist. Installed as the Communist Party's general secretary in 1965, he rose to absolute power by 1974, proclaiming himself president and launching the Genius of the Carpathians cult. Ceausescu's regime built the notorious Securitate, one of Eastern Europe's largest and most feared secret police forces, creating a climate where even family members feared becoming informers. By the late 1980s, Romania was a nation strangled by austerity. Ceausescu's obsession with repaying foreign debt plunged the country into darkness. Literally, food, heating, and electricity were scarce. Meanwhile, he and his wife Elena lived in opulence, building the colossal People's Palace while ordinary Romanians stood in breadlines. The spark of revolution ignited in Timișoara in mid-December 1989. Ceausescu responded with violence, ordering troops to fire on protesters. This only fueled outrage. By December 21st, Ceausescu attempted to reassert control with the infamous balcony speech, broadcast live across Romania. What began as a routine propaganda event unraveled instantly. The crowd's boos and chants of Timișoara, Timișoara pierced the carefully controlled atmosphere. Ceausescu, visibly confused, tried to regain control, asking,
"Who is shooting? And an earthquake? What?"
His detachment from reality was laid bare for all to see. The live broadcast abruptly cut to a red screen. Yet in a final act of delusion, state television tried to resume the broadcast with staged footage and fake applause. The illusion shattered completely when revolutionaries stormed the Central Committee building. Ceausescu and his wife fled by helicopter, bouncing between safe houses before being captured near Târgoviște by local soldiers. Their arrest sparked debates among the new revolutionary authorities. Some wanted a swift execution, others insisted on a trial. What followed was a hasty 1-hour drumhead court-martial on Christmas Day 1989. The charges: genocide, subversion of state power, destruction of public property, undermining the national economy, and attempted flight with over $1 billion deposited in foreign banks. The evidence was thin, but the verdict was predetermined. Before execution, Elena Ceausescu pleaded for them to be shot together.
Then I asked the officer to grant them their last wish, to be shot together.
Să fie împușcați împreună.
Nicolae, still defiant, declared,
"I have the right to do what I want."
Their final moments were captured on video, showing the couple being tied up before the firing squad. The sudden sound of automatic gunfire marked the end of their regime. It was a swift, brutal conclusion to 24 years of dictatorship. The execution happened so quickly that the assigned television crew only managed to film the aftermath. Romanian citizens expressed overwhelming relief and joy.
"It's fantastic. We never believed that we are gonna live this day," one man declared. Another called it the most happy Christmas we had for 20 years long.
Celebrations erupted nationwide, with crowds waving Romanian flags bearing the iconic hole, where the communist emblem had been cut out. The revolution wasn't just political, it was cultural and spiritual. Churches reopened, and Christmas was celebrated openly for the first time in decades. Yet questions about the rushed trial and execution linger to this day. The official narrative claimed 60,000 deaths under Ceausescu, but later investigations counted around 1,100 victims during the revolution. The supposed $1 billion in foreign accounts was never found. The new regime argued the execution was necessary to prevent loyalist attacks, but no evidence of such threats emerged. 3 decades later, Romania still reckons with its past. Trials continue for those involved in the revolution's violence. Many Romanians question whether true justice was served, or if the execution simply protected the new government's interests. The Ceausescu's hasty end became the last execution in Romania, before capital punishment was abolished in January 1990. Their unceremonious burial in Bucharest's Ghencea Cemetery stands as a stark reminder of how quickly absolute power can crumble. From absolute ruler to executed dictator in a matter of days, Ceausescu's downfall remains a powerful lesson in the fragility of totalitarian regimes. His final balcony speech, captured forever on video, stands as evidence to the moment when fear finally gave way to freedom. But the story of dictators' final words before meeting their end doesn't end here. The next case takes us to Italy, to see what the most famous dictator in modern Italy said before he was executed.
Milan was in a state of the wildest excitement at about this time, for partisans had just killed Mussolini.
Milan, late April 1945. The city is in chaos as retreating German forces make their final exit, facing jeers and hatred from the liberated crowd. Mussolini, once the iron-fisted dictator of Italy, finds his world collapsing around him. His time, marked by violence and oppression, is about to end in a way he never could have imagined. The man who once demanded absolute obedience now flees like a common criminal. Before his death, Benito Mussolini, the self-styled Duce, is accompanied by his devoted mistress, Clara Petacci. Together, they desperately search for escape, hoping to slip across the Swiss border as Italy erupts in rebellion. But fate has other plans. Captured by partisans near Lake Como, Mussolini is a shadow of his former self. Witnesses describe him as pale, exhausted, and broken, stripped of the bravado that once terrified a nation. The revolutionaries don't hesitate. There's no grand trial, no final speech, just a summary execution ordered by the Committee of National Liberation. The execution itself is a grim affair. According to most accounts, Mussolini's last words are simple and stark. "Aim at my heart." The shots ring out, ending the life of a man who once controlled millions. His body collapses beside Petacci, marking the end of an era. But in Milan, the true spectacle is only beginning. As news of the dictator's death spreads, the city, recently freed from fascist rule, erupts in visceral celebration and vengeance. Mussolini's battered body, along with Petacci and other fascist leaders, is dumped in the Piazzale Loreto, the very square where 15 partisans had been executed months earlier under his orders.
The bodies of the ex-dictator, his mistress, and fellow fascists were left lying in the square, and the enraged Italians took the opportunity of kicking them and flinging rubbish on them.
Now the tables have turned dramatically. The crowd's reaction is immediate and violent. People kick, spit, and throw refuse at the corpses. One grieving mother empties her pistol into Mussolini's body, screaming vengeance for her 5 murdered sons. Others shout that he died too quickly, that he should have suffered more. The hate is raw, deep, and decades in the making. Authorities struggle to control the mob, but the collective fury is unstoppable. Firemen are called in, but even their hoses can't cool the public's rage. The bodies are desecrated in ways too graphic to fully describe. A final humiliation for the fallen dictator. As the frenzy builds, the crowd demands more. The corpses are strung up by their feet from a metal gantry, swinging above the square where so many had suffered under Mussolini's regime. The symbolism is unmistakable, a complete reversal of power and a public warning to any who would follow in his footsteps.
final ghastly scene was the hanging of the bodies upside down outside a petrol station. Well, at least it's a warning to all remaining fascists.
The spectacle is witnessed by thousands, captured in photographs and film that will become iconic images of fascism's defeat. Mussolini, once obsessed with control over his public image, now has no say in his final appearance. His lifeless body, bloodied and battered, becomes a symbol of Italy's liberation from tyranny. The aftermath is messy and complicated. Eventually, the American military orders the bodies taken down and moved to a mortuary for examination. But the damage is done. Mussolini's carefully constructed image as a powerful leader is forever shattered. His first burial is in an unmarked grave, but even in death, he's not allowed to rest. Fascist supporters steal his body, moving it from place to place for months, before it's eventually recovered and hidden by authorities. It takes over a decade before his remains are finally laid to rest in his hometown of Predapio. Mussolini's death is more than just the end of a dictator. It's a turning point in history. His final words, "Aim at my heart," echo through time, a reflection of a man who built his life on violence and paid the ultimate price. But if you think this was brutal, wait until you hear the shocking last words of the next dictator on our list.
As you escorted Saddam Hussein into the execution chamber, what was the atmosphere like in that execution chamber shortly before he was killed?
December 29th, 2006. The world watched as Iraq's most notorious dictator faced his final hours. Saddam Hussein, once the iron-fisted ruler of Iraq, now stood on the brink of execution, his fate sealed by a controversial trial that divided a nation and the world's opinion. Saddam Hussein, born in a village near Tikrit in 1937, rose from humble beginnings to become one of the Middle East's most feared leaders. His regime was marked by brutal repression, chemical attacks on his own people, and unwavering control over Iraq's diverse population. For over 2 decades, he ruled with absolute power, leaving behind a legacy of fear, violence, and deep divisions within Iraqi society. After his capture by American forces in December 2003, Saddam spent 3 years in U.S. custody. His trial for crimes against humanity, specifically the Dujail massacre of 148 Shiite Muslims in 1982, became a global spectacle, and the proceedings were fraught with controversy, accusations of political interference, and threats against his defense team. 3 of his lawyers were murdered, and several judges were replaced during the turbulent process. On December 26, 2006, Saddam's appeal was rejected. The verdict was final: death by hanging. In his final days, Saddam maintained a stoic demeanor, spending his time writing poetry, tending to a small garden, and reflecting on his legacy. He requested to be executed by firing squad, citing his military status, but this was denied. On his last night, Saddam was reportedly calm. He spent time writing, reading the Quran, and meeting with his 2 half-brothers. He gave them his personal belongings and a copy of his will. That evening, he ate his final meal, chicken and rice with honeyed water. At dawn on December 30th, 2006, Saddam was led to the gallows at Camp Justice in Baghdad. He wore a black suit, hat, and shoes, refusing prison garb. As he ascended the scaffold, he clutched a Quran and refused to have his head covered. The atmosphere was tense, with witnesses from both Iraqi and American authorities present. In his final moments, Saddam remained defiant. He shouted,
God is great. The nation will be victorious and Palestine is Arab.
As the executioners prepared him, they taunted him, chanting the name of Shiite cleric Muqtada al-Sadr. Saddam responded mockingly,
Do you call this bravery?
As the noose was placed around his neck, Saddam began to recite the Shahada, the Islamic declaration of faith. He managed to say,
There is no God but Allah and Muhammad,
before the trapdoor opened, cutting him off mid-sentence. His last audible word was Muhammad.
And my comrades, my friends who were accompanying me, some of them, they were shouting slogans.
Saddam's execution was broadcast on Iraqi state television. stopping short of the actual hanging.
As news of Saddam Hussein's execution spreads across the globe, reactions within Iraq are mixed. Many Iraqis watch the execution on television.
However, a leaked mobile phone video showing the entire execution, including the taunts and his final moments, quickly spread across the internet, sparking outrage and debate worldwide. His body was returned to his birthplace, Al-Auja, near Tikrit, and buried before dawn on December 31st, 2006, next to his sons Uday and Qusay. The tomb, initially a site of pilgrimage for supporters, was later destroyed during fighting with ISIS, but reports suggest his remains had been moved beforehand. But if you think Saddam's final moments were dramatic, the next case shows an even more shocking end for another infamous dictator, as well as his final words.
Some will find the pictures disturbing. Muammar Gaddafi's blood-soaked body is paraded like a trophy by jubilant fighters. Those who suffered under his regime may not care, but how Libya's former dictator was killed after apparently being captured may prove controversial.
It's October 20th, 2011, Sirte, Libya. The man who ruled with absolute power for 42 years is dragged from a concrete culvert, bloodied, battered, and begging for his life. Muammar Gaddafi seized power in 1969 and ruled Libya with an iron fist for over 4 decades. He styled himself as the King of Kings of Africa and built a cult of personality around his Green Book ideology. By 2011, his regime was collapsing under the weight of the Arab Spring uprisings. As rebel forces closed in, Gaddafi fled Tripoli and took refuge in his hometown of Sirte, surrounded by his remaining loyalists. In his final weeks, Gaddafi moved between abandoned houses in Sirte, cut off from the world and increasingly delusional about his fate. According to Mansour Dow, a close confidant interviewed by Human Rights Watch, Gaddafi spent his days reading the Quran, complaining about the lack of electricity, and refusing all pleas to surrender or flee the country. As rebel forces tightened their grip on Sirte, Gaddafi's situation grew more desperate. Food and water ran low. Communications were severed. The once mighty dictator was reduced to scrounging for basics in a city under siege. On October 20th, Gaddafi and his inner circle made a last-ditch escape attempt. At 8:30 a.m., a convoy of 75 vehicles tried to break out of Sirte's District 2, carrying wounded loyalists, civilians, and Gaddafi himself. But NATO forces were watching. An American Predator drone fired the first missiles, followed by French Mirage jets. The convoy was decimated, dozens killed, vehicles destroyed.
Another says he bled to death in an ambulance. This is reportedly where the dictator who ruled for 42 years was finally cornered. He called us rats, but look where we found him, said one fighter.
Gaddafi's car was hit by a blast that triggered the airbag. He and his son Mu'tasim fled on foot, taking shelter in a nearby villa compound. But rebel forces closed in, firing anti-aircraft guns and mortars at their position. With escape routes cut off, Gaddafi and a handful of loyalists crawled through a drainage pipe, his final hiding place. Above them, rebel fighters exchanged fire with the remaining bodyguards. In a tragic twist, one of Gaddafi's own guards threw a grenade at the advancing rebels, but it bounced off the concrete and exploded among their group. The blast killed Defense Minister Abu Bakr Yunus and wounded Gaddafi in the head. Rebel fighters quickly overran the position. They found Gaddafi dazed, blood streaming from his head wound, barely able to comprehend his situation. As they dragged him from the culvert, he reportedly pleaded,
"What did I do to you?"
and "Don't shoot me." But the mob was beyond reason. What followed was brutal and chaotic. The fighters shouted, "God is great," as they punched, kicked, and stabbed the fallen dictator. One fighter sodomized Gaddafi with a bayonet, an act later confirmed by multiple human rights investigations. Blood poured from multiple wounds as he was manhandled by the mob. As the frenzy continued, one fighter triumphantly brandished a golden pistol taken from Gaddafi, an ironic symbol of the dictator's fall from power. Officially, the National Transitional Council claimed Gaddafi was killed in crossfire between loyalists and rebels. But multiple video clips and eyewitness accounts tell a different story. Some say he was shot by his own guard to spare him further humiliation. Others claim he was executed by his captors. What is clear? He was alive when captured and dead soon after. Gaddafi's bloodied corpse was paraded through the streets, then placed on display in a Misrata meat locker for public viewing. Thousands lined up to see proof that the man who had ruled their lives for decades was truly gone. Human Rights Watch documented widespread abuse of prisoners and summary executions at the site of Gaddafi's death. At least 66 other loyalists were found executed at the nearby Mahari Hotel, many with hands bound behind their backs. The Libyan authorities promised an investigation, but little has come of it. The exact circumstances of Gaddafi's death remain shrouded in controversy, with conflicting accounts and video evidence showing his brutal treatment in captivity. Gaddafi's final words, "What did I do to you?" echo as a chilling reminder of a dictator's disconnect from the suffering he caused. His gruesome end was both a moment of justice for many Libyans and a stark warning about the dangers of mob justice. But if you think Gaddafi's final moments were wild, wait until you see what happened with the next dictator on our list. June 1st, 1946. The prison courtyard at Jilava in Romania was silent except for the heavy footsteps on gravel. 4 men, formerly among the country's most powerful leaders, were led by armed guards toward their final destination. At exactly 6:06 p.m., history would record one of Eastern Europe's most dramatic reckonings. Ion Antonescu was no ordinary dictator. Born in 1882, he rose through the Romanian military ranks, eventually becoming marshal and self-declared conductor, leader of Romania. In September 1940, Antonescu leveraged a national crisis to seize control, forging an uneasy alliance with the fascist Iron Guard and aligning Romania with Nazi Germany. Though he initially presented himself as a military man above politics, his regime quickly descended into authoritarianism and brutality. During World War II, Antonescu's government committed some of the era's worst atrocities. His collaboration with Hitler led to the deaths of between 280,000 and 380,000 Jews and thousands of Romani people in Romania and occupied territories. His forces participated in the infamous Odessa massacre, where 25,000 civilians, mostly Jews, were murdered in retaliation for a bombing. Under his rule, Romania became one of Nazi Germany's most reliable allies, until the tides of war turned. By 1944, with Romania's armies devastated at Stalingrad and Soviet forces advancing, Antonescu's grip weakened. Desperate for survival, he secretly reached out to Western allies through neutral diplomats, but his overtures failed. On August 23, 1944, young King Michael I, whom Antonescu had treated as a mere figurehead, staged a coup, ordering the marshal's arrest. The once powerful dictator was reportedly locked inside a gigantic safe used for the royal stamp collection before being handed over to the Soviet command. Antonescu spent months in Soviet custody before returning to Romania for trial. In April 1946, he appeared before the People's Tribunal in Bucharest. The charges were staggering: war crimes, crimes against humanity, genocide, and treason. The evidence, voluminous and irrefutable, documented the regime's systematic murder, forced labor, and forced deportations. On May 17, 1946, the tribunal pronounced its sentence. Antonescu demanded to face a military firing squad rather than gendarmes and insisted on commanding his own execution. Both requests were granted. His final words to the court:
"I demand a death sentence for myself. I refuse to seek pardon."
The execution was meticulously documented. On the morning of June 1st, Antonescu and 3 co-defendants were led outside. A detailed list of officials, witnesses, and military personnel was present, ensuring no doubt about who bore responsibility for the firing squad. The condemned men were blindfolded and positioned against posts. At precisely 6:06 p.m., a military officer gave the signal. The firing squad executed the 4 men. To ensure death, a coup de grace, final shot, was administered to each body. The entire process was filmed, providing undeniable evidence of justice served. In his final moments, Antonescu refused a blindfold and saluted the firing squad before the shots rang out. His last written words to his wife urged her to join a convent and expressed belief that posterity would reconsider his deeds, while accusing Romanians of being ungrateful. The execution site, known as Valea Piersicilor, which means Valley of the Peach Trees, became infamous as the place where Romania ended one of its darkest chapters. The execution of Ion Antonescu marked a definitive end to fascism in Romania. But if you think this dictator's final words were dramatic, wait until you hear about the next case. The final chapter in the story of Adolf Eichmann begins not with a grand declaration, but with the echo of justice reverberating through a bulletproof glass booth in Jerusalem. This was no ordinary trial, and Eichmann was no ordinary defendant. The architect of the Holocaust's logistics now found himself isolated, facing the consequences of orchestrating the murder of millions. So, known as the master planner of the Nazi final solution, Eichmann was responsible for the systematic deportation and extermination of Europe's Jews. His post-war escape to Argentina under the alias Ricardo Clement allowed him to live in obscurity for years, but justice would not be denied. Mossad agents, through meticulous surveillance and daring tactics, finally captured him and brought him to Israel. The trial itself was historic for many reasons. It was the first time Holocaust survivors could publicly testify about their experiences, giving voice to the millions who could not speak. Eichmann, sitting in his glass cage, maintained an air of bureaucratic detachment. He consistently claimed he was merely following orders, showing no remorse for his actions that included orchestrating transportation to death camps and overseeing the machinery of genocide. The court proceedings were meticulous, with evidence and testimony building a comprehensive case against Eichmann. The footage from the trial shows him calm and composed, listening as the details of his crimes against humanity were laid out. The bulletproof booth that surrounded him was not just for his protection. It symbolized the magnitude of his offenses and the raw emotions his presence evoked. Eichmann's defense centered on the claim that he was just a small cog in a large machine. However, the evidence told a different story. He was, in fact, the machine itself, responsible for organizing the trains, scheduling deportations, and ensuring the machinery of death operated efficiently. Survivors' testimonies painted a vivid picture of his direct involvement in their suffering.
Eichmann is found guilty of crimes against the Jewish people, crimes against humanity, and war crimes.
Adolf Eichmann would be convicted and hanged.
As the trial reached its conclusion, the verdict was clear. Eichmann was found guilty on all counts: crimes against humanity, war crimes, and crimes against the Jewish people. The court rejected his defense of just following orders, recognizing his pivotal role in the machinery of genocide. Forta, his final days were marked by a desperate attempt to shift responsibility. In a handwritten plea for clemency, Eichmann claimed he was a mere instrument of the true leaders of the Holocaust. He wrote to Israel's president insisting, "I was not a responsible leader, and as such, do not feel myself guilty." But the world had heard enough of his justifications. On May 31st, 1962, at Ramla prison, Adolf Eichmann faced his ultimate reckoning. The execution was carried out with the same precision he once demanded of his death trains. But even in his final moments, Eichmann's last words were calculated, a mix of defiance, loyalty, and a chilling lack of remorse. He reportedly declared,
"Long live Germany, long live Argentina, long live Austria. These are the three countries with which I have been most connected and which I will not forget. I greet my wife, my family, and my friends. I am ready. We'll meet again soon. As is the fate of all men, I die believing in God."
Yet, according to Rafi Eitan, who accompanied Eichmann to the gallows, his true last words were even more ominous.
I hope that all of you will follow me.
Within hours, Eichmann's body was cremated, and his ashes were scattered in the Mediterranean Sea, ensuring that no memorial could be built for the man who had orchestrated so much death. But if you think Eichmann's final words were wild, wait until you see what happened with the most famous and brutal dictator in modern history.
Du meine Arbeit für richtig hältst, ob du glaubst, dass ich fleißig gewesen bin, dass ich gearbeitet habe, dass ich mich in diesen Jahren für dich eingesetzt habe, dass ich anständig...
April 30th, 1945. Berlin's smoldering ruins trembled under Soviet artillery as Adolf Hitler's world closed in around him, deep beneath the Reich Chancellery. The man who once commanded millions now found himself trapped in a concrete tomb of his own making. Hitler was 56 years old and physically wrecked by Parkinson's disease.
Almost certainly had Parkinson's disease. He was shaking in his left hand. He was shuffling.
In the claustrophobic darkness of the Führer bunker, his body and mind deteriorated rapidly. Once obsessively neat, he now ignored his appearance, letting cake crumbs collect on his once pristine mustache. His left hand trembled constantly, and witnesses described his shuffle, clear signs of his failing health.
Hitler was in a very fragile mental and physical state in the bunker, in which he had been living for weeks. There was no sunlight in the bunker, and Hitler began to neglect his physical appearance.
Yet even as the war collapsed around him, Hitler clung to delusions of grandeur. He imagined himself still commanding vast armies, sending out orders that no one obeyed. His mind fixated on historical parallels, especially Frederick the Great's miraculous comeback during the 7 Years' War. In the bunker, a portrait of Frederick hung above his desk, a constant reminder of hope against impossible odds. But reality was closing in. The Soviets were just blocks away. On April 28th, news reached Hitler that his ally Mussolini had been executed and his body desecrated by partisans. Hitler swore he would not suffer the same fate. That same night, he married Eva Braun in a brief ceremony within the bunker. The next morning, Hitler dictated his political testament and personal will. He named Admiral Donitz his successor and left precise instructions for the disposal of his body. April 29th, the last full day. Witnesses describe Hitler moving from room to room, shaking hands with staff and saying a final silent goodbye. That afternoon, he tested a cyanide capsule on his beloved dog Blondie, confirming its deadly effectiveness. By April 30th, the bunker was a tomb. Soviet troops were less than 500 meters away. After a final meal with his secretaries, Hitler and Eva retreated to his private study around 2:30 p.m. Guards stood watch outside as they prepared for death. What happened next would become one of history's most scrutinized moments. Witnesses heard a single gunshot. Hitler had shot himself in the right temple while biting down on a cyanide capsule. Eva took only the poison. Their bodies were found seated side by side on the sofa, Hitler's blood staining the armrest. In accordance with his wishes, loyal staff carried the bodies up to the Chancellery garden. They doused the corpses with petrol and set them ablaze under heavy shell fire. Witnesses reported the scene. The Nazi salute given in silence as the flames consumed their leader. Despite Soviet claims and decades of conspiracy theories, forensic evidence confirms Hitler's death. His dental remains, recovered by the Soviets and later authenticated, match perfectly with pre-war records. French pathologist Philippe Charlier's 2017 analysis confirmed the teeth and bone fragments were genuine. As the Soviets closed in, Hitler's world shrank to a few square meters of reinforced concrete. His final moments were not those of a conquering hero, but of a broken man, physically and mentally defeated, choosing death over accountability. In the end, the dictator who demanded total loyalty from millions left behind only ashes and unanswered questions.